Have you ever wondered why some men carry a quiet heaviness in their eyes? Like they've seen a war no one else remembers? It's not always visible at first. You might notice it in the way he stares too long at nothing, or in how he laughs at the wrong moments just to keep something inside from breaking open. Beneath the surface of strength, independence, and control, there exists a wound so ancient that even he doesn't know where it begins. Carl Jung called it a fracture of the soul, the rupture between the masculine ideal and the human within. Modern society doesn't let men bleed where it can be seen. Instead, it teaches them to weaponize silence, to build walls from logic and call them virtue. He is told to conquer, to perform, to endure. But inside, his spirit rots under the weight of unexpressed pain. The boy who once reached for tenderness learns that affection is weakness. The adolescent who cried out for guidance finds that vulnerability is punished. And so he begins the great retreat from his own heart. When Jung spoke of the shadow, he was not talking only about evil impulses, but about all the parts of the self that the ego cannot bear to face. For men, the shadow often hides behind competence, stoicism, and charm. It wears a mask of composure while beneath it burns a deep fear, the terror of being truly seen. To be seen would mean to admit the loneliness, the exhaustion, the unspoken hunger for love that doesn't demand performance. Most men are haunted by the belief that they must earn their right to be loved, that their worth depends on what they can build, fix, or endure. This is the silent wound, the ache of being forced to become protector before ever being allowed to be protected. It's the grief of boys who grew up being told, "Be a man," before anyone showed them what a man actually is. The result is an archetypal tragedy. Generations of warriors without wars, hunters without wilderness, kings without kingdoms, struggling not against nature, but against their own reflection. You can feel this wound in the way he withdraws when the conversation becomes too real, in the way his tone sharpens when tenderness tries to touch him. He might love deeply, but love terrifies him because it dismantles his armor. The masculine ego fears dissolution more than death. To surrender feels like annihilation. And yet, the deepest part of his soul, the self Jung described, longs for exactly that: to be undone, to be remade, to integrate the forgotten child, who still waits at the gates of his heart. When you look closely, you'll see how modern culture keeps this wound alive. Men are taught that emotion equals instability, that asking for help is shameful, that validation must come through conquest, career, money, dominance, control. But the psyche rebels. The soul resists. And so, while his outer world thrives, his inner world decays. Depression becomes the language his body speaks when his spirit is silenced. Anger becomes the only emotion society allows him to show without ridicule. You've probably met this man. Perhaps you've loved him. Perhaps you've tried to reach him, only to feel him slipping away, not because he doesn't care, but because he's terrified that love will expose his weakness. He doesn't know how to stay. Every time he begins to open, an old voice whispers, "Don't trust this, don't need anyone, don't fall." That voice belongs to the boy who once fell and was met not with compassion, but with laughter. This is why Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires confrontation with the shadow. For men, it means facing the parts of themselves they were forbidden to express: fear, sadness, tenderness, and longing. The integration of these elements doesn't make him less masculine. It makes him human. It makes him real. The Stoics understood this too. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events. But power over the mind is impossible if the heart remains unacknowledged. Imagine for a moment what happens when this wound is left unhealed. The man becomes emotionally absent, reactive, or addicted to distractions that keep him from feeling. He overworks, overthinks, overperforms, anything to escape the quiet. But the quiet always follows. Beneath every achievement, he feels a subtle hollowness, a sense that something essential is missing. What he doesn't realize is that what's missing isn't another victory. It's himself. The tragedy is that the world rewards his disconnection. The less he feels, the more productive he becomes. The more detached, the more respectable. Yet his relationships suffer, his joy diminishes, and his dreams begin to fade into survival. Jung once wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But how can he become who he is if half of him remains buried under the ruins of who he was told to be? And so the cycle continues, until something or someone interrupts it. Sometimes it's heartbreak, sometimes loss. Sometimes a woman who looks at him not as the hero he's pretending to be, but as the lost soul he really is. Her presence doesn't save him. It exposes him. It forces him to confront the emptiness he's carried all along. And, if he's ready, this confrontation becomes the beginning of awakening, the moment where he stops running from himself and starts listening to what the silence has been trying to say. When the silence finally breaks, it does not do so gently. It comes like thunder. Inside his chest, a trembling recognition that the armor he thought protected him has also imprisoned him. The man who was once praised for being strong begins to realize that strength without softness is merely tension held too long. The tension of decades, of generations, of men told that to cry is to fail, to feel is to falter, and to need is to shame one's name. Beneath that stoic exterior there lies a grief with no language. Jung would call it the collective wound of the masculine. It's not just personal, it's ancestral. It's the echo of fathers who could not say "I'm proud of you" because no one ever said it to them. The echo of wars fought not just on battlefields, but within hearts forced to repress their own tenderness. Every man inherits this silence. It is carved into him before he even speaks, a psychological inheritance written in the tone of his father's voice, the stillness of his mother's disappointment, the rules of a society that worships resilience but punishes emotion. And yet, this silence is not empty. It's filled with ghosts, repressed emotions wandering the corridors of his unconscious. They appear as irritability, cynicism, or emotional distance. They surface in arguments that have no clear cause, in outbursts that surprise even him. The truth is that he is not angry at the world. He is angry at himself for not knowing how to show pain without breaking something. Jung warned that what remains unconscious will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. For many men, this fate takes the shape of repetition, relationships that collapse the same way, emotional disconnection that sabotages love, achievements that never satisfy. The unconscious seeks to heal through reenactment. He keeps meeting reflections of his inner wound in others, especially in women who mirror back the very emotions he refuses to claim. To love a wounded man is to see the paradox of the masculine soul. The one who desires closeness the most is the one who fears it the deepest. His instinct is to retreat when intimacy threatens his illusion of control. He has been conditioned to believe that vulnerability equals weakness, so when a woman loves him too openly, it stirs terror, not comfort. Her love becomes a mirror too bright for his shadowed self. In that brightness, he remembers the child who once cried for affection and was told to man up. The boy who felt small, unworthy, replaceable. The boy who decided then and there, "I will never let anyone see me like this again." That vow becomes the blueprint for his adult relationships. He keeps a distance, not because he lacks love, but because love feels dangerous. To open himself would mean revisiting the humiliation of being small again. But every man must eventually face the smallness he abandoned. The soul demands it. The longer he resists, the louder his life will scream. Broken relationships, emotional numbness, the hollow success of external triumphs, all are invitations to descend into the unconscious and reclaim what was lost. Jung called this descent the night sea journey, the archetypal passage through darkness toward integration. It is not a punishment, it's a pilgrimage. You can sense when a man enters this journey. His tone shifts, his eyes soften. He begins to speak less, not out of avoidance but out of reverence for what he's discovering. He no longer seeks to prove, he seeks to understand. The same hands that once built walls begin to reach across them. The same mind that once sought to dominate now yearns to connect. The stoic shell cracks, and through that fracture something luminous emerges, the human beneath the hero. This transformation is not romantic, it's sacred. It's a death and rebirth of identity. The man must bury the false archetype, the provider, the protector, the performer, and meet the self that has always waited beneath. Jung believed that the masculine soul contains not only the warrior, but also the poet, the mystic, the lover, and the sage. These aspects have been exiled to maintain the illusion of control, but the psyche is not whole without them. So when he weeps for the first time without shame, that is not weakness, it is initiation. When he admits confusion instead of pretending to know, that is not loss, it is liberation. For the first time, he tastes freedom from the tyranny of perfection. He begins to understand what the Stoics meant when they spoke of apatheia, not indifference, but inner calm amidst chaos. True mastery is not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. And you, watching him from the outside, might sense that something sacred is unfolding. It's not your task to fix him. Healing cannot be forced, it can only be witnessed. Your presence, your patience, your refusal to rescue him from his own depth, that is what allows him to meet himself there. Every time you stay grounded when he retreats, every time you love without losing yourself, you remind him that connection is possible without losing dignity. But remember, not every man will answer this call. Some will cling to their armor until it consumes them. Some will drown in the silence rather than speak. Yet even in their resistance, the collective field shifts. Every man who chooses awareness becomes a torchbearer for those still trapped in the dark. He becomes proof that masculinity and vulnerability are not opposites. They are partners in wholeness. There comes a moment when the wound, long denied, begins to speak in ways the mind can no longer silence. It speaks through the body first, a tightening of the chest, a sleepless night, a sudden flood of anxiety that seems to come from nowhere. Then it whispers through the patterns. The relationship that collapses just when intimacy deepens. The impulse to withdraw right when love tries to draw near. This is the language of the unconscious demanding recognition. Jung would say the psyche will go to any length to make you whole, even if it must shatter you to do it. For many men, that shattering begins when their old identity stops working. The roles that once defined them, provider, achiever, protector, suddenly feel hollow. The applause they chased no longer soothes. What once gave them pride now feels like a burden. This collapse is not failure, it is initiation. The false self begins to die so the real one can emerge. But death, even symbolic, is terrifying. The ego fights it with everything it has. It rationalizes, distracts, and numbs, desperate to avoid descent. Yet, the descent is inevitable, for only in the dark can he find what light truly is. You can see it in his eyes when this inner collapse begins, the confusion of a man who has everything yet feels nothing. He may not call it depression, but it's there. A quiet grief for the years he spent performing. The persona, that carefully crafted mask, begins to crumble, and when it does, the emotions he buried, fear, shame, tenderness, rise like ghosts demanding acknowledgement. This is the crucible of the masculine soul, to sit with what he once ran from, to let the tears he denied become rivers of truth. To confront this pain is not to regress into weakness, but to mature into authenticity. The Stoics knew this. Seneca wrote that, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." Yet the adversity that shapes the modern man is often internal. It's the battle between who he is and who he pretends to be. In silence, he meets his own fragility and realizes that real courage is not in domination, but in surrender. To the truth, to emotion, to the parts of himself he once disowned. As he descends deeper, he encounters the archetype of the inner child, the innocent self exiled long ago. The boy still waiting for approval, still fearing rejection, still believing he must earn love. The man kneels before this boy, not as a savior, but as a witness. He tells him what no one else ever did. You were never weak for needing love. You were human. That moment of recognition becomes the bridge between his fragmented selves. Integration begins where shame ends. Every man who undertakes this journey discovers the same paradox, that the parts he thought made him undesirable are the very keys to his wholeness. His sensitivity, once ridiculed, becomes his intuition. His fear, once denied, becomes his humility. His longing, once hidden, becomes his capacity for deep connection. Jung called this the process of individuation, the reconciliation of opposites within the self. It is the path of becoming fully alive, no longer ruled by the masks society demands. Yet even as he heals, the world around him may not understand. It will still call him soft for being gentle, naive for being honest, weak for choosing empathy over dominance. But the awakened man no longer lives for approval. He has seen that the cost of fitting in was the death of his soul. The opinion of others becomes a whisper compared to the roar of inner truth. When a man begins to embody this integrated strength, something profound happens. The women around him feel it instantly, not in his words, but in his presence. There's no need for manipulation or control. His energy communicates safety. His power no longer comes from assertion, but from awareness. He becomes what Jung described as the magnet of the self, a man whose wholeness draws others toward their own. You, as the observer, or perhaps as the woman standing before him, sense this shift. You recognize that his stillness is no longer suppression, but in sovereignty. He no longer fears the feminine within or without. He honors emotion without drowning in it. He leads not by dominance, but by example. His masculine essence has transformed from a wall into a container, a space where love can exist without fear. This is the healed masculine, firm yet tender, disciplined yet receptive, protective yet open. He is not the hero who slays dragons, but the sage who befriends them. He no longer runs from pain. He listens to what it teaches. His worth is no longer tied to his performance, but to his presence. The energy of conquest evolves into communion. And yet this transformation does not mark an end. It marks a beginning. For when the masculine heals, so too does the feminine. The polarity that once caused conflict becomes the ground for sacred balance. The man who knows his wounds no longer projects them onto others. He no longer demands that a woman mother his emptiness or validate his worth. Instead, he meets her as an equal, a mirror of divine wholeness. The wound in men, once a source of pain, becomes a portal to wisdom. Through it, he learns compassion. Through it, he finds peace. And through it, he rediscovers what the world forgot to teach him, that strength and sensitivity are not opposites, but two halves of the same divine truth. In the quiet aftermath of awakening, a man begins to see his life with new eyes. The noise of old identities fades, and for the first time, he feels the weight of everything he once carried: expectations, pride, fear, duty. They had given him purpose once, or at least the illusion of it. But now, stripped bare, He sees how much of his strength was built upon suppression. He realizes that he has been living in reaction to a wound, not an expression of a soul. And so he begins the slow and sacred work of rebuilding himself, not from ambition, but from awareness. This reconstruction is not dramatic, it is subtle. It shows in the way he pauses before responding, in the way he listens instead of defending, in the way he lets silence stretch without fearing it. He no longer rushes to fill the void with achievement. He allows the void to speak, and it whispers of all that he once abandoned: creativity, play, gentleness, even rest. He begins to sense that his life does not need to be a conquest. It can be communion. Jung often wrote that the greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived life of the parents, and many men, upon awakening, realize they have inherited not only their father's values, but also his unresolved fears. The father who worked endlessly, not out of joy but necessity. The father who loved silently, never knowing how to say the words. The father who lived for duty and died for reputation. These archetypes live on in the son until he dares to question them. Healing, for the masculine, often means breaking a lineage of emotional imprisonment. It means being the first to choose truth over tradition. This is not rebellion born of anger, but liberation born of compassion. The healed man does not despise his father. He understands him. He sees that his father, too, was shaped by forces older than himself, by centuries of cultural conditioning that demanded suppression as survival. And in that understanding, forgiveness becomes possible. He no longer seeks to be different from his father. He seeks to become whole for both of them. That is the true act of generational redemption. As he integrates, his relationship with women transforms. The feminine no longer threatens him. It awakens him. He no longer measures his worth by her validation. He no longer needs her to heal what he refuses to face. Instead, he approaches her as an equal, another soul walking the same labyrinth of consciousness. The dynamic shifts from power to partnership, from projection to presence. He stops chasing the fantasy of completion and begins honoring the reality of connection. For the woman who meets such a man, the difference is unmistakable. He no longer oscillates between distance and desire. His affection is steady, not frantic. His love is grounded, not performative. He can hold space for her emotions without shrinking from them, because he has learned to hold his own. He no longer fears her depth, because he has already walked through his own darkness. This is what Jung meant by the sacred marriage of the psyche, the union of the masculine and feminine within, mirrored in the outer world as balanced love. But this equilibrium does not arrive without sacrifice. The man must let die everything that once made him feel powerful but kept him disconnected. The pride of self-sufficiency, the armor of stoicism, the addiction to control. Each layer peeled away feels like a small death. Yet with each death comes more life. The paradox of healing is that it strips you of everything you thought you needed until you stand in your essence, naked and enough. He begins to understand that true mastery is not domination, it is harmony. The Stoics spoke of living in accordance with nature. For the modern man, nature is not just the forest or the sea, it is his own inner landscape. His storms, his seasons, his tides. When he learns to move with them instead of against them, peace arises naturally. He stops fighting himself, and in doing so, he becomes unstoppable. The healed man is not loud. His power does not come from assertion but from gravity. People feel his calm before he speaks. He doesn't need to prove, he emanates. His confidence is quiet because it comes from alignment, not performance. And yet, beneath that stillness lies fire, a purpose that no longer comes from ego but from essence. He becomes a builder again, but this time not of empires, of souls. He plants peace in the hearts of those he touches simply by being. But do not mistake his calm for passivity. He still feels anger, desire, grief, but these no longer control him. They inform him. Emotion becomes energy instead of chaos. His discipline is not the cold rigidity of suppression, but the warm focus of alignment. He becomes the embodiment of what Jung called the integrated man, one who walks between order and chaos without losing himself to either. And to the woman who witnesses him, there is both awe and recognition. For she senses that in healing his own wound, he has also healed part of hers, the wound of women who have carried the burden of emotional labor for centuries, who have longed for a man who can meet them without projection, without fear, without armor. When such a man loves, it feels like remembering something ancient and true. His love does not demand, it invites. It does not bind, it liberates. In his eyes, she sees not the reflection of a savior or a sinner, but a mirror of her own wholeness. And that is where the true revolution begins. Not in dominance, not in reversal, but in reunion. The masculine and feminine, finally meeting not in competition, but in consciousness. There comes a day when the healed man stands before a mirror, not to admire, but to recognize. The reflection that stares back is no longer the boy who needed to prove, nor the man who needed to perform. His eyes hold the quiet gravity of someone who has walked through fire and understood that the flames were never meant to destroy him, but to purify. His scars have become scripture, his silence a language. For the first time, he does not fear what he feels. He reveres it. The world senses this transformation, though it cannot name it. There is something about him, an energy both grounded and untamed. He moves slowly but with purpose. His presence feels like truth, unhurried, undemanding, unafraid. This is not the masculine of domination, but of devotion, to life, to growth, to authenticity. He no longer confuses power with control, nor strength with hardness. True power, he has learned, is the capacity to remain open when everything in you wants to close. He begins to see the game society has played with men for centuries, praising their achievements while starving their souls. He sees how competition was used to divide, how pride was weaponized to silence, how fear was disguised as honor. And with this awareness, he steps out of the illusion. No longer does he chase approval, status, or the illusion of invulnerability. He chooses something rarer, peace. But peace is not a passive state, it is a discipline. It demands vigilance against the old ghosts that still whisper in his ear. Don't trust, don't feel, don't need. He hears them and smiles, not with arrogance but compassion. He knows those voices once protected him. Now they are relics. He thanks them and moves forward. Jung once wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. The healed man understands this terror, and he embraces it. Acceptance, he knows, is the most radical act of strength. This acceptance extends beyond himself. He no longer views women through the lens of projection or possession. He no longer needs to win them, fix them, or define himself through their gaze. He can finally see them, whole, complex, radiant in both their tenderness and their fire. The woman beside him feels the difference immediately. She feels seen without being consumed, cherished without being caged. And for her too, this is healing. Because when a man integrates his own feminine essence, the capacity to feel, to receive, to nurture, he frees her from the burden of carrying both energies. She no longer has to play both roles. She can rest into her own being, knowing she is safe in his presence, not because he controls, but because he honors. Together, they become mirrors of mutual wholeness, not halves seeking completion. This union, within and without, is what Jung called the conjunctio, the sacred marriage of opposites. It is not romantic in the conventional sense, it is alchemical. the fusion of shadow and light, chaos and order, masculine and feminine, forming something transcendent, a consciousness that no longer divides. When this union occurs within one person, it ripples outward, transforming relationships, families, even cultures. And yet, the healed man does not declare himself enlightened. He knows that wholeness is not a destination, but a rhythm, an eternal dance between breaking and becoming. Some days he falters, some days he forgets, but he no longer despises the forgetting. He knows that to be human is to fall and to rise again, endlessly. His worth is no longer conditional upon perfection, but upon presence. He becomes a living embodiment of what Marcus Aurelius wrote: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The mind he commands is not the rigid mind of the soldier, but the fluid mind of the sage. He can enter the storm without being consumed because he has befriended the storm within. He has learned that maturity is not the absence of emotion, but the integration of it. And so he walks through the world differently. His footsteps carry calm. His words are measured, his laughter unforced. He no longer performs masculinity, he embodies humanity. People are drawn to him not for what he has, but for who he is. His authenticity becomes magnetic, his peace contagious. He leads without needing followers because his leadership is not domination, it is illumination. When such a man meets love again, it is no longer to escape loneliness, but to expand consciousness. Love becomes a collaboration, not a compensation. It becomes a sacred act, a shared devotion to growth. The relationship ceases to be a battlefield of unmet needs and becomes a sanctuary where two souls evolve in parallel. To witness such love is to glimpse the future of the collective psyche, the healing of the human polarity itself. For every man who integrates his shadow, a lineage of women is freed from carrying his emotional labor. And for every woman who honors her own boundaries, a lineage of men is freed from unconscious guilt. This is the silent revolution that begins not in politics, but in the heart. And perhaps that is what this whole journey has always been about. Not to escape pain, but to understand it. Not to transcend humanity, but to inhabit it fully. The wound in men was never a flaw, it was a doorway. Through it, they learn the art of compassion, the strength of vulnerability, and the sacred power of truth. Because in the end, the man who heals his wound does not become less masculine. He becomes divine. The protector becomes the poet. The warrior becomes the healer. The hunter becomes the guardian of peace. And the world, starved for conscious strength, begins to heal through his presence. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.